Hey everybody, just reached 100 subscribers. Really pumped. Me and Rob are doing a bit of a sweepstakes, bit of a giveaway available to all our worldwide subscribers. All you have to do is be subscribed, leave a like on the video, and put a comment on one of our videos explaining which one of our videos you like the most and which one you want us to see in the future. We'll be giving away one Crucible of War playmat, as you can see in my screen, and Rob will be giving away two cold foils.
One cold foil Kodachi promo and one Romping Club cold foil promo as well.
Thanks everyone for watching. Hello everybody and welcome back to Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood YouTube channel, and we have our first video in a new series. I know it just came out with a seemingly new series for the hero profiles, but this is a different series called Back to the Basics, and this is going to be episode 1 of Back to the Basics, where we break down a couple of the key fundamentals of Flesh and Blood that are kind of the building blocks of both casual and competitive play, where we feel people would always stand to always keep improving, essentially. And so that's kind of the idea here. And we have our guest, Mr. Dimos Kalupis, and we titled according to the first letter of his name, Defending with Dimos. It just happens to be what we're talking about today. But I am joined by my co-caster, co-commentator, and co-compatriot, Mr. Rob McGalley. And of course, Dimos Kalupis, as you might have seen from the old him hero profile, you'll see his face right in the top right. That is going the wrong way. There we go, right in the top right over there. Who recently top aided the Canadian Nationals with old him. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about the fundamentals of kind of blocking in the game, and then give a couple of more specific scenarios to kind of flesh out the points we're trying to make. And so starting off, really the first thing is the efficiency while blocking that can apply to kind of the most heroes, not one in particular. And so that includes things like trade-offs, blocking with certain cards, figuring out what you can come back with after you've blocked with said cards. And so we're going to let Dimos take it away on that first one to see what we can all learn from this great discussion here.
Sounds good. Excited to be talking about defending. It's one of my favorite parts of the game.
Core tenets.
Yes, it definitely is. I think it's something that people a lot of times gloss over because there's a lot to defending. And the way I'm going to break this down is into 3 different scenarios. Basically, blocking for this turn, blocking for next turn, and blocking for the entire game. And all of those things affect individual decisions that you make when you see your hand. Mm-hmm. So, as an example, I've got Brava out here. One of my personal favorite heroes also has a very handy weapon that lets you basically change the attack value, which you'll see in one of the examples might be relevant. So this is the hand that we've drawn here. We've got Spinal Crush, we've got a blue Choke Slam, we've got a blue Showtime, and we've got a blue Last Ditch Effort.
Right.
So we've got one threat, something that's not going to be useful until the very, very end of the game, if at all, a utility card, and a very mediocre attack. So right. We're going to be, for this first example, we're going to be playing against a generic opponent. Something I like to consider whenever I'm defending or deciding my turn, which are one and the same. When you defend, you are deciding what you are doing on your turn. And that's something that, especially a lot of very novice players, I think, skip over, where they go, okay, I'll defend with one card. I won't defend with a second card, but then they don't do anything with that card during their turn, and they just draw up 3 cards at the end of that next turn.
Right.
So it's, that's lost value kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
To avoid that, what I try to do is stick to a rule of 12. You've got 4 cards. Each one of those 4 cards should be getting you 3 points of value. So either it's defending for 3, or it's helping you attack for 3 or more damage.
Okay.
Bravo's a great example of this because everything comes in multiples of 3. Right? The hammer hits for 6, Spinal Crush hits for 9, and all the cards block for 3. So for the sake of simplicity, for this first example, we're going to do that, which is basically, it's arithmetic. Are you getting the maximum value out of your blocks and on your turn? So You're sitting across from your opponent. This is the hand you're looking at. They play this is a yellow scar for a scar. They play it. They've got less life than you. It has go again. Right. Well, there's no on-hit effect, but, you probably still want to block it out depending on what the damage is. for the purposes of this example, we're not going to look at the on-hit effect of Spinal Crush. So probably the first thing we're going to do is block out, let's say with Showtime. There are various game reasons why you'd want to block with Showtime or Chokeslam or Spinal Crush or whatever, but for the purposes of this, they all block for 3. Then they play another Yellow Scar for a Scar, still with Go again because life totals are the same. Okay, well, we've, at this point, it's relevant to us to decide what we want to do on our turn. If we block with another card, we can't play Spinal Crush. But in the interest of just basic arithmetic on defense, we're going to block the Spinal Crush this time. And then they're going to swing with Talishar. So this one's coming in for 4. And our main decision here is, well, do I block with 0 cards, 1 card, or 2 card? If I block with 0 cards, I can swing back with the hammer for 6. So I take 4, deal 6. I'm, let's say, +2 in quotes on the situation.
Right.
I can block with 1 card and then swing the hammer for 4. For example, which lets me, I take 1 damage and I deal 4. So I'm +5 on the attack, in quotes. You're not actually plus or minus anything because realistically what you're doing here is the exact same thing they did. Right? Yeah. So these all cancel each other out. They're swinging a weapon for 4. If you pitch and swing a hammer, it's only going to come in for 4 if you're doing it with 1 card. So you're basically doing the same thing. Mathematically, this is the best value you're going to get out of the hand at this point, from this point onwards. Let's shift these over. And it's probably something, as Bravo, you're not complaining about. You got some cards out of their deck. It's all fine and well. This was a better scenario than saying, I'll take 4 and then deal 6, or I'll block 6 and deal 0, for example.
Right. Yeah, so it's got the maximum efficiency is what we're kind of talking about here when we're at the point where we have a hand of 4 cards. So ignoring the fact that more complicated scenarios, you like arsenal and equipment and all that kind of thing, just like the basic four card scenario that you want to, of course, with Bravo, as Dimos was mentioning, we're talking about the 3s, the multiple of 3s. But of course, this kind of goes for expanding it to other heroes that you have to balance your blocking with what you're going to do on your turn, whether it's utility, let's say you really want to get a Showtime off, you're going to need 2 cards, something plus a Showtime, right? Let's say you want an arsenal. So everything costs incremental values for wanting to do more and more on your turn, depending on how much damage you want to take.
Yes.
So that was a very good kind of general example of kind of the efficiency with blocking. So I kind of want to take it up a notch, a nice little spicy pow here with equipment. And so how does someone decide whether or not to block with equipment? And is there any kind of, I know you have this beautiful surefire rule in terms of the rule of 3 here, but how does equipment play into that?
So equipment is there until it isn't. So, which means it can be used for 2 things. One, to fix a terrible hand. So, for example, this hand could be a bunch of block 2s and a Sigil of Solace. Right? I can block for a total of 6. Well, dang, my opponent's coming in with an on-hit effect. I probably want to block that. Right. So generally, you save your equipment to block on-hit effects. That's the general rule. And equipment is more effective the higher percentage of the life totals it represents. Right. So if you're each down to 2 life, but I still have 5 block on my equipment on the board, I can basically say this 5 block can replace me blocking with 2 cards from hand. And then, brilliant, I now have a full 3 cards to swing back with. On Bravo, that's enough to dominate. On other heroes, that's enough to come in with awkward amounts of chip damage. Or, find ways to whittle your way through.
Yeah, so we're talking about kind of pushing the game at different points. Equipment allows you to pivot at those points, whereas if you had an awkward hand.
I'm hesitant to say, to go into pivoting because that's a
different topic. Yeah, different topic in general. Yeah. No, you're
it's complicated. It's long, but basically, don't use your equipment unless you have to. If you're so, for example, on that last swing on Talishar, I'm blocking for 3 damage. Well, 1 damage is coming through. Okay, that 1 damage doesn't mean anything if I'm at 25 life. So why would I add Helm of Eisen's Peak? Unless I'm planning on using it the next turn, for example.
Right. I
Right?
guess.
Don't block with your equipment unless there's a reason not to.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
another good one. The good example of
Yeah.
as Demos mentioned, unless you're about to use this, things like Skeletor, things like that was actually the only one I had in mind. There's other pieces in mind where
that have
like
a temper
temper.
ability.
Yeah, they have something where you want to block with them once and then use them. Courage of Bladehold is another big one where you want to get that full 2-block value before going in there. But that's a good point with that.
From breaking scales, that kind of thing.
Yep.
But basically, don't block with your equipment unless you have a very good reason to. It's something that should be kept in the back of your mind and only the back of your mind.
Right.
You shouldn't go into every turn thinking, if I block with my equipment, how will my hand get better? So, for example, on this turn, if I have the life total, I'll just take this damage if I want to play out my cards.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than block with my equipment, because I want to save that for, when maybe one of these plunder runs is being, or one of these Scar for Scars is being buffed by a plunder run. And
relevant on hit, yeah.
It's an on hit effect, it's a meaningful difference, etc.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess you can look at equipment block as an addition to your life total. So if you're looking at like 20 health in Blitz and like 6, armor, you can say I've got 26 health. And so it doesn't matter whether or not I take the damage up front and use my equipments, later on. Or I should say it does matter because you can use the equipment later on to block devastating on hit effects. Whereas using it early, it's as if you just lost a bit of health and then, either way, you're losing the health total. Yeah.
Except, there's an argument that equipment is better than health because it can block on hit effects. Right. It's 6 health.
Yeah, can't tag it to the face.
You've got some like premium health total up here that you don't have to use right away.
Exactly.
yeah.
Color coded bar, but armor
like a purple bar over your red bar.
Equipment is
with all this talk of on hit effects. I think it's relevant we go to our next example.
This is the medium.
Yes, the medium, the blocking here.
Yeah.
So this is when you're thinking ahead to your opponent's next turn and your next turn afterwards, right? So in this hypothetical scenario, you don't know what your opponent has, but you know that you're 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the way through the first cycle of your deck.
Sure.
Right? As Bravo, this is the second Spinal Crush you've seen, and you've seen 0 Crippling Crushes. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, those 4 threats that are left, 3 cripplings and 1 more spinal, have to come up at some point in these next 5-6 hands. So you're thinking to yourself, the odds that I draw another good follow-up attack are pretty high. Right? So with that logic in mind, they play Scar for a Scar. You have a Spinal Crush. We're also going to pretend you have a Seismic Surge because it makes the math easier. Which means that you can play Spinal Crush dominated off of 2 blue cards plus Spinal Crush, right? Which basically gives you a free card that you can block with as you wish. So this first Scar is coming in. I'm not going to block it. It's 3 damage. I don't care. I know it has Go again. They've still got 2 cards in their hand. The second Scar is coming down. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I block this one. Maybe I don't. It doesn't matter too much at this point. But I'll probably say, no blocks. And then they swing Talishar and you go, okay, this one doesn't have Go again. That's fine. I'll block that out with the Showtime, for example. Right? Looking what they've played against you, so this is a pretty aggressive deck. They're running Scars, 0 cost, Go against, etc. Spinal Crush is probably a good thing to land against them, right? Rather than against a slower deck that only does one thing per turn where losing Go again from Spinal Crush doesn't really matter. So at this point, you've taken 6 damage, or 7 damage, because of the leak through the Talishar.
Sure.
You're going to be responding with a total of 9 damage. So, mathematically, this is, it still hits the rule of 12, but it's less efficient than our last turn by 1 point. Because last turn we blocked for a total of 9 and swung a hammer for 4 is 13. Here, we're blocking 3 and we're going to be coming in for 9. It's only a total of 12, but this 9 comes with a very nice on-hit. So your opponent's turn ends, this goes to the graveyard. On your turn, Seismic Surge will activate.
Sorry to cut you off a little bit, but when you decided to let go, or let those 2 Scars go, is there a reason why you let those first 2 go? If you could elaborate a little bit more into that.
Basically, because they had no on-hit effect, and they had Go again. So
something else is coming.
Foreseeing another threat afterwards that
exactly
could prompt you to want to block. Okay,
yeah. Odds are they're going to be coming in with something else. odds are if you're running scars, you're also probably running snatches. So maybe I want to
Something that you
keep
want
a
to
card.
use.
Yeah,
One
maybe I
card
want to keep
plus
a card to block a
equipment.
snatch, something with an on hit, right?
Gotcha.
Especially because I'm, in my head, I'm thinking it's a good idea to only block with one card this turn. So, and then on my turn, we're gonna token activates, we're gonna dominate, we're gonna play out the Spinal Crush. Ideally, this will hit. If they don't have an arsenal, it's very hard for them to block this unless they, have a lot of equipment or they draw into an unmovable, something like that. If they do have an arsenal, this play might still be worth doing because this will take the defense reaction, and then the odds that you are going to get another good attack next turn are pretty high, and then you can just keep the crush train going that way, which is kind of how Bravo plays the game. So it's at this point where we're looking at, this is my plan for the next turn, 2 turns, 3 turns kind of thing. This is what I can expect from my deck, right? Even though it's less damage efficient, you're trading it for the on hit, and you're basically saying, I'm taking damage to try and get some tempo out of this.
Yeah, I was about to say like that. The keyword is definitely tempo there, especially when you, as you said, depending on your game state, you may have a better idea on what's coming next, what your threat density is like, and then you feel more confident taking a little bit more damage because, as you said, Bravo does hit pretty hard, but he tends to also have those 4 blue hands that come in fairly regularly, especially in the earlier game. So it's really about, depending on what deck you're playing, knowing your deck well enough to be able to figure out whether defending face up essentially and not worrying as much about your own next couple turns versus, hey, I've kind of pitch stacked in this particular way. Judging by what my opponent is doing, as Dimos kind of mentioned, you want to get this your core plan across, which in Bravo, as Dimos put, is to crush big, crush hard, and crush often. And so with that, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit. I know we got one more nice example coming up here, but I want to also talk about blocking more in the more kind of aggro decks versus blocking with more of the controllier decks. Oldhim, Bravo could be obviously mid-range kind of thing, but I think Demos kind of taking the control side. How do you? Are there any specific differences that you want to talk about whilst defending with those types of heroes as opposed to more aggressive heroes?
Yes. So in both these instances, how you block affects how many cards you have in your deck, which is a very real concern for a lot of classes. So as Bravo, I'm not concerned if my deck gets pretty thin, right? I know I've got high value cards. I've got unmovable that, blocks for 2 cards worth on 1 card. So even though I have to spend 2 cards on any given turn, it's only 1 card that's out of my deck. Plus, I know that at the end of the game, if I'm left with 2 blues in my entire deck, I can swing a hammer for 6 every turn.
Right.
That's going to beat an equal endgame state on any other hero if they just have an unupgraded weapon. Right? The exception being dash and pistols, etc. So as a control player, you're generally more comfortable with having fewer cards in your deck. As an aggressive player, you've got maybe 45 red cards, right? Those are at a big premium. If all of those cards are gone and you're stuck with 15 blue cards, well, what are you going to do? They deal 2 damage scar for a scar instead of 4 damage. That's not, you're not hitting the numbers that you still want to hit. So because of that, preserving the number and the quality of the cards in your deck, I think, is very important. And that's a very good thing to do when you're defending. And it does tie into my next example, but I'll let you talk on the aggro side a little bit more.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points, especially about the deck composition later in the game. I think aggro decks, we're looking at things like nowadays Briar. It used to be some Katsu back when Katsu was still slightly worse Briar. But my point is for decks like that, especially, people tend to, I feel a lot of them tend to go super aggro super fast and not think about their second cycle, third cycle density, and it turns out to be a lot of blues, as Demo said, is a lot worse for an aggro deck where either their weapon doesn't do as much or it's not really their strategy, but really trying to pitch certain red cards is actually quite beneficial, and that ties into blocking, as aggro heroes tend to use their hit points a lot more liberally as an extension of themselves rather than armor, because a lot of them don't have a lot of armor other than maybe like chain, which is more of a mid-rangey ish kind of build nowadays. It is still aggro, but not as much as like Briar go face go home kind of thing. But even so, I think defending is definitely a lot less comfortable in an aggro deck, whereas 5 card hands have such a premium compared to a control deck, which off 1 or 2 blues, you can do most of what you want to do on a control deck. And so I think because you want to keep your deck larger, especially into other control matchups and even to other aggro matchups, defending is not as required nor recommended based on the fact that your damage output on 5 cards is always going to be higher than a deck that's not at least as aggressive as you. And so that can slide us very nicely into Dimos' next and final example, I think, of the defending situation.
Yes. So at this point, we're talking about defending for the entire game, where you're making plays now that will allow you to defend more effectively 15 turns from now. Right. So let's say we're, I don't know, 5-6 turns in, something like that, right? The pace of the game has been established. Both players kind of know what's going on. This is the hand you're looking at. It's Unmovable, Showtime, Spinal Crush, and Chokeslam. But
that's a blue. That's a blue unmovable, right? Sorry, I'm just making sure here.
Okay. This hand here is less important than what we're going to be seeing our opponent doing at this point, because another important part of defending is defending as a reaction to what your opponent is doing, right? That's inherently what you're doing. You're blocking the attack value on their cards. You're also trying to block out their game plan as a whole. Right. So last turn, you saw the Dorinthia player that you're playing against pitch a Glintha Quicksilver to pay for their turn. It was fine. It went well, whatever. On your turn, let's say you came in with Undominated Disable or something.
Right.
And so they pitched a Steel Blade Supremacy in order to play Steel Blade Shunt, just so it didn't get sent to the bottom of their deck. Right? So what your opposing player has done now is they've pitched Glintha Quicksilver and they've pitched Steel Blade Supremacy. This is a quite a strong combination of cards.
It's quite nice.
Glint is a powerful combination of cards. Glint can give a go again. Glint can also pay for the whole turn. And even though you may not have seen it, if they're running Sink Below or Enlightened Strike or anything else, there could also be a Spoils of War or a Twinning Blade or that third very important piece of the combo down at the bottom of their deck as well.
Right.
So if I see any 2 of those combination of cards go down to the bottom of the deck, I immediately think, okay, can I kill them before they see those cards again? Well, we're 5-6 turns in. We each have 35, 32 to 35 life. No, I can't. All right. I need to come up with a plan against this. Also, for the purposes of this example, we have a Sink Below in Arsenal. That's always a good idea to have against a Dorinthia. Easy. So we see this. They play out their hand. It's, I don't know, mildly threatening because they've only got 3 cards. You say, okay, sure, I'll block for 6 against your swing for 3. Maybe they react, maybe they don't, etc.
Right.
At this point, my thought is I have an unmovable in hand. Right. I need to get that to the bottom of my deck and back up to the top of my deck before they can pull off this combo. So how can I accomplish that? Well, one, you should have a clear idea if you're defending over the course of the entire game, and that's your game plan from the outset, of how many cards they have in their deck. Generally, Dorinthia probably likes to bring quite a few cards in this matchup. Bravo also likes to bring quite a few cards in this matchup. So it wouldn't surprise me if either of these heroes were bringing between 65 and 70. So, but because I know I'm running unmovables, I'm running staunch responses, I can go, I can probably get away with running 63, 64 cards depending on my deck makeup. Right. Let's say they're running 68. Okay, great. I have a buffer of 4 cards to work with already. I want to see if I can extend that just a little bit. So what I'm going to do on my turn, I'm going to pitch, I'm going to swing the hammer, I'm going to make sure the unmovable goes on the top of these 2 once they're flipped over, so I see it first. Then, over the course of the game, I might play my Sink Belows and my Fate for Scenes slightly differently, knowing that every card that I sink is 1 card sooner that I'm going to see that unmovable.
Right.
And every Fate for Scene, if I Fate for Scene and I opt, and I see a perfectly serviceable blue block 3, Normally it's 50-50. Do I put that to the bottom? Because I know I need to cycle back to this unmovable very quickly, the answer becomes definitely yes, I'm cycling it, unless I actively have a good reason not to.
Right. And
So the idea is that, you know, one turn, ideally, before they see their steel blade, their glint, potentially their twinning, I see this unmovable in my hand,
right.
and I slam it straight into the arsenal.
Yeah, to give you the six block coming out of the arsenal, which could
Yeah, the 6 block coming out of arsenal is great because it ensures that reprise isn't turned on for glint, and it minimizes the effect that twinning would have, right? Because otherwise, if I have 0 reactions in my hand when that comes back around, so let's say it works out decently well. I've got 4 3 blocks in my hand. Once this comes back around, if they have managed to pair it with the twinning blade, which I would have brought up for example, but I don't have any.
fair.
You go, geez, okay, they have steel blade supremacy. They're swinging dawn blade. They're coming in for 5. They've got 1 card. They've got 1 resource floating, 1 card in arsenal, and they've got 2 cards in hand. Well, that's posing an awful lot of damage. So my options are basically block 9 or block 12 if I don't have a reaction.
Right.
Whereas if I do have an unmovable in arsenal, I can block 3 or block 6, depending on what threats I think they have still left in their deck.
Right.
And then if they do add some of those reacts, then I can add an immovable.
Right.
Or maybe I can actually just start with a couple pieces of equipment. And it gives you that flexibility because you're seeing the cost of them pitching the Steel Blade Supremacy is high. Because it means they're not threatening you on the turn this is pitched. They're deciding to threaten you later. So you need to decide to defend against that later.
Right.
And that it doesn't happen accidentally.
That's fair. I think I probably want to add only one thing is I like to call it premium blocking. And I in my mind, it's essentially, depending on who you're facing, they only have so many premium cards, either buff cards, attack reactions. In Dorinthia's case, Steel Blade Supremacy is the premium card, especially in the Bravo matchup, because there's very few ways for Dorinthia without a whole lot of setup to actually break through the defenses that Bravo has in his arsenal, literally and figuratively. And so as Dimos was kind of explaining why his only options were blocking for 9 and 12 is because he can't let that Steel Blade go through, because that is an extremely powerful premium card from Dorinthia that can snowball out of control if that actually ends up hitting. And so the ability to coordinate your blocks and your defending to analyze the threat, be able to assess what you have at your disposal, whether you have an arsenal, whether you have armor up, like this is a very good candidate to use armor blocks because there's only 3 of them in the deck, and there is no way of getting the Steel Blade back. Steel Blade Supremacy back for Dorinthia. And so this would be a nice candidate for an armor block if armor was up. And a lot of the times closing out a game with Dorinthia does require maybe they've used 2 Steel Blades and they're waiting for that one final big Steel Blade Supremacy till you're at like 12 or 13 to push through the remaining damage, right? And that's why, as Dimos was explaining earlier, don't use your equipment before you have to, because you will need it later on for these very big plays on the premium block. So I just wanted to kind of layer that in there because I think people kind of misassess the need to either overblock or underblock or however, right? I think these are all really, really great examples to showcase here. The only last thing I had that maybe Demos can chime in on is the difference between CC and Blitz. You kind of alluded to, of course, in Blitz, or maybe Rob alluded to in Blitz, is you start on 20. I mean, if you're Kano, you start on 15. But for most cases, you start on 20 unless you're, I think KO starts at 20. I know Benji starts 19. At 17. So KO's 19, Benji's 17, I think. Yeah. Kano is 15. Yeah. Most people are 20, and so Demos, like, kind of fairly quickly here, is there a difference in your logic when you're defending for Blitz and CC, other than the fact that you start on much less health, so your equipment is multiplied in value kind of here, because your equipment doesn't go down in blocking just because you're playing Blitz, only your life goes down.
It depends. Sorry, first, before, just a caveat.
Sure.
Supremacy is an action, so theoretically, if Dorinthia is running Remembrance,
Theoretically, that is true.
be decently common, especially
It's
against the
in the
Bravo
sideboard,
matchup.
yeah. In the sideboard, if they are expecting Bravos, I do agree with you. However, on a generic level, I would never ever expect a Dory to come in not knowing they're playing any Bravos but bringing anyways. However, I do agree with you.
Yeah, and well, I mean, it adds to that supremacy on it. Bravo doesn't really care about supremacy on its own. The thing that makes it scary is the unconditional go again on Glint and twinning to allow them to swing a second time, for example.
Yeah, the 5-card hands with supremacy
right.
set
So
up.
it can be recurred, but it needs a combo of
Sure.
reactions that can't be recurred at the time being. But
Yeah.
to address the Blitz question, the answer is it depends what hero you're playing. It depends what hero you're going against. Blitz changes how heroes have their end games, basically. So, for example, if you're Bravo playing against an Ira, your only viable strategy, just because they outdamage you and they have defense reactions, is to fully fatigue them. So that changes my defense plan to block out basically everything I can. Right? It doesn't matter that I can swing the hammer for 4. If I can block for 3 on the end of my turn, I'm going to do that anyways because I need to keep that life total high, for example.
Right.
On the other hand, there's heroes like Prism. Aura Prism is a monster in CC. Well, against a lot of decks, it's absolutely fantastic. In Blitz, because you only have 20 life, you lose that buffer in order to set up your board state. It's the same reason you don't see Pistol Dash. So you need to acknowledge the difference in the meta and the difference in what the game plan is of the person sitting across from you. So, I mean, at the end of the day, math is math. Blocking efficiently is good. But the blocking in Blitz might just change what your end game is. Right? For example, if you're playing Levia or Chain, you're going to be blocking with Husk pretty aggressively because it gets taken away from you in 7 life.
Too early. Too damn early.
Rather than 27 life. So because of that changes how you use your equipment, which changes how you block with your cards, which changes, how do you deal with, well, I'm Levia and I'm Chain. Both of those heroes need a few turns to ramp up before they can start doing anything really impressive versus, so I want to save my equipment for that big pivot turn 3-4 turns in. Well, my Husk gives a limitation on that and basically informs me as a player, okay, I need to defend more aggressively so I have time to get to that state.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Speaking about defending effectively, I was wondering if you can comment on how the arsenal kind of plays into that. If you're looking at just the plus system where you said, think about 12, think about how much damage the opponent's doing to you versus how much you block on your own turn. Very quickly, I was wondering, how would you gauge blocking for 3 versus arsenaling the card that you block for 3 with? I assume it depends on the card, but do you have like a system that you use, or is it just always to arsenal a card?
I'm not going to be arsenaling Blue Chokeslam, for example. That's a bad card to arsenal. On the other hand, I might arsenal Spinal Crush because that's a good card to arsenal. In short, it basically comes down to, am I going to get minimum 3 points of value off of that when it comes out of arsenal?
Gotcha.
So it changes the math from being strictly on that same turn what's on the board to what's coming next turn, for example.
Right. Oh, that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It's very much, keep it simple.
Don't overthink it, otherwise
basics and then work your way up, because
you don't want to sit there thinking about a block for 5 minutes and getting called on time. So it's all relative, and it takes practice. I don't want to stress this enough. I can't stress this enough. This takes a lot of practice to figure out blocking mechanics, and I hope this video, to all our viewers at least, was able to siphon off a little bit of Dimos's defending with Dimos's master knowledge here that they can apply to their own choice of hero and choice of format. But appreciate everybody watching this inaugural. Oh, sorry.
Into one last.
Do you have a one-liner?
One thing from this video. Remember that.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a timestamp here. What's up?
You determine your turn on your opponent's turn. How you block determines how you attack. It determines everything that's going to happen in the next turn cycle.
Yeah.
So when you defend, know exactly what you're doing on your turn.
No, it's true. It's
Don't have hanging
using
cards
your
that you can't use.
no, it's using your time effectively. When your opponent is thinking about what they're doing, you got to be thinking about what you're doing also. It's not just on the next turn. So it's a very good kind of succinct point here. And appreciate everyone watching. If there's a particular mechanic that everyone wants to see us cover next, whether it be pitching, pivoting, tempo, something like that, we have a couple ideas for different episodes. But hopefully everyone appreciated Dimos coming on to our second video and sharing his knowledge with us to make us all better players, which is the whole idea here. So appreciate it. If you like the video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. It does help us a lot, and we do appreciate it. And with that, thanks everyone for watching. Bye for now.